listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
How's everyone doing? Thanks for listening, and as always, I'm Rob Lane, and this is the Straight to Video podcast, episode 109. Today's guest is one of the nicest guys you can meet in the music industry, and he's so cool, he just needs one name, much like Prince or Madonna. On today's show, I speak to Smiley, drummer for rock legends The Alarm and also electronic alternative band Archive. So I first met Smiley when our band Ryan Hamilton and the Harlequin Ghosts got the wonderful opportunity to tour the UK with The Alarm a few years ago. The entire Alarm family, from the band, crew, right through to their amazing fan base, treated us so well it made for an amazing couple of weeks. During the shows I found out Smiley had been the original touring drummer for Robbie Williams during the 90s, which blew my mind a little as I was a big fan, particularly of Robbie's first album, which is chock full of its singles, and the live show I saw at Rock City in Nottingham was phenomenal. Since that gig, Smiley went on to perform with other rock royalties such as Joe Strummer and has toured with Bad Company, to name but a few, before teaming up with Mike Peters in 2010, and he's been with The Alarm ever since. It was a lot of fun to hook up and chat to learn a little more about Smiley's early introductions to the drums, his incredibly varied career, and just his thoughts on being a touring musician, which I think you'll love to hear. Smiley also has a brand new solo album called 2021, which is released soon, and it can be pre-ordered from his website smileysfriends.co.uk. And he also has his own book entitled Clang, Smiley Drops a Few. So if you want to dig a little deeper into his encounters with some of the most famous musicians in the world, then you can pick this up from gatecrashthepartybooks.com or through Amazon. Before we dive in, I want to shout to the latest Straight to Video patron, Gordon Lancaster. Thanks ever so much, mate, for joining all the other amazing supporters over on our Patreon page. If you'd like to help support the show, get behind-the-scenes access, early news on guests, along with exclusive merchandise, then please visit patreon.com/STVpod for more info, and support tiers start at just £2 a month, which really does make a difference in the growth and ongoing success of this podcast. Also, if great quality coffee is your thing, then the good folk at Dead Skull Coffee are serving up listeners to this show a whopping 15% discount on their quality ground or full bean coffee. Simply head on over to deadskullcoffee.co.uk and add the promo code STV on checkout to grab that saving. Alright, I know you're going to enjoy this because Smiley was on great form, so be sure to let us know what you think. But for now, please enjoy my straight to video talk with drummer for The Alarm and Archive, the one and only Smiley. I'm going to throw things back. You fill in the gaps for me, but you were born and raised in London. Whereabouts exactly?
I was West London, so I was Sunbury-on-Thames, actually born in Hampton Court, so I am royalty. 998 to the throne, I think. That's a lie. I was born 100 yards from Hampton Court Palace, because it used to be a little hospital there. Yeah, I grew up in West London and then kind of ventured out to Hampshire, which I live now.
Do you have any particularly fond memories of the city as a kid during the 70s and 80s? Was it a big thing or just all you knew?
I loved it, man. I loved it. We were kind of near, in Sunbury with Staines and kind of, we used to go to Brentford to watch the football, and my dad's a massive Chelsea fan, so he would take me to Chelsea on a Saturday, and No, it was very close to London. You know, you're only 40 minutes on the red bus, the 237 from Sunbury to go and see, like, if we were bored on a Saturday afternoon, we would just go and see Brentford or QPR or something. So that was, I enjoy my childhood. I didn't particularly like school or anything. Seems like I was the only musician in my school, which didn't really help.
You got any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I've got a younger sister and twin brothers who are like 8 years younger than me. We were quite a tight-knit family growing up. You know, we always went on holidays together and all that. So yeah, it was a very nice environment my mum and dad made for us. And they're still here. They're still alive. They're still full of beans, which is great.
And they realised really early on that you had pretty good rhythm because you were playing along to the radio and as a toddler and actually keeping time.
That is actually true. That's one of the few things in my book that's true. My mum says she can remember the day when I was actually in a high chair and she just looks and I was actually just playing along to the radio. She said, and I did it on everything. And it was the one thing growing up that, you know, when you're a kid and you're the only one who does something. So I was the only kid who had a drum kit and I was the only kid who played drums and all that. So everybody now, whenever I kind of stumble across somebody on Facebook or something from school, they'll kind of go, "Oh man, you're still playing drums. I remember you in Ashridge Way when we used to hear you play them and we used to walk to Scouts down the alleyway and all this." And it was the only, and then I got to about 15 and my dad said to me, "You need to learn other instruments, man." And I was like, no, Dad, I'm going to be a drummer. He's like, "I'm telling you," he said, "Trust me on this, you need to learn other instruments." And I did. I just kind of opened up the rest of my career. I just taught myself how to play guitar and piano and learned to sing and then it just opened it all up, really. So that was the best advice he ever gave me.
Because you got like the drum background. Did it help with like the rhythm and stuff like that, the strumming and all that kind of thing, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think I always had a bit of songwriting in my bones, in my genes. My dad was in a band. He was like in a Christian band. So we used to see him when I was a kid and he would play like coffee bars and, you know, and he was a singer and he wrote songs. It was always in the house and there was always guitars in the house and there was always music. Always. And so as I was growing up, it wasn't necessarily cool. You know, there was a lot of Beatles and stuff, but it was great. But there was also a lot of John Denver and Cliff Richard.
Some good melodies there, man.
Well, that's it. That's the key. I've spoken to my dad about this recently, actually. We were playing golf and I said, "Do you think that's what it was, Dad? I've been able to write all these albums and stuff." He went, "Yeah." He said, "Melody." He said, "It's obviously what you picked up on." Because all those people I've mentioned are, you know, Glenn Campbell and the Beach Boys, and it's all melody.
Some of the most beautiful melodies ever written.
Yeah, exactly. Wichita Lineman is probably the greatest song ever written. You know what I mean? Like, as a piece of work. So, yeah, I think that was in my childhood. Being a drummer anyway, whatever you Philistines out there in bass world think, drummers are musicians hidden under all that bonkers, bombastic nonsense, you know. And you'll find the great drummers of the world, Dave Grohl's and stuff, are, you know, most drummers can write and most drummers can play other instruments and most drummers can produce and stuff like that. And the good drummers, definitely, you know, you look at like people like Butch Vig and stuff who went on to produce. But, you know, primarily, everybody just thought he was a bit of an average drummer.
Because you aim pretty high with your influences, like the classics, John Bonham, Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, Stuart Copeland. Do you remember any specific times you heard them for the first time?
I remember like the first time I kind of got into at school, we were like into the Jam and the Police and people like that. It was funny because later on in like my career, when I was playing for people like Joe Strummer, people like that, everybody just assumed that I was a massive Clash fan, right? But I tried to explain to people, you had to be a certain age just to really appreciate punk and all that, right? Because if you missed it by 2 years, which I think I did, like I only knew Strummer from like the hits, really. I wasn't like a Clash fan. Obviously, I had to learn it all. But when I did From the Jam with Bruce Foxton, I remember I knew everything. I knew all the songs. And I remember that. So we kind of just missed the punk thing. And we were like into, as I say, the Jam. We were into the Police, like maybe Madness, the Specials, that kind of thing at school. And then what happened was in my teens, I used to go to like this kind of Christian youth group thing because my dad ran it. And there were a lot of cool older guys. They were about like 4 or 5 years older. And they were into like U2 and the Waterboys and the Alarm. And
was the hair getting a bit bigger around that time?
Yeah, and all that, yeah, exactly. And then by chance, so they were just like, as I say, soaking me with this amazing platform of music, which I was like lapping up. But then going back to school, and nobody had heard of these bands. So it was like I was living this kind of strange double life. And then when I was like 14, they asked me to join their band and all that. So I was like this kid who hadn't even hit puberty yet, playing with these older cool guys. And so it was a really good social upbringing because I was hanging around, rather than hanging around with the idiots at school who were just doing the usual stupid things that idiots at school do. all my trendy friends were kind of going, when it came to like drink and drugs and that, they were kind of going, yeah, we've kind of done that. It's a bit rubbish, so don't do it. And I was like going, all right then. So I was actually really clean cut. You know, I swerved all that nonsense and then the music just took over. But bizarrely, all the influences that they kind of got me into, pretty much I met or played with over the years, which is mind-blowing. Like I auditioned for the Water Boys and, you know, things like that, and met him and everything and told him he thought it was hilarious. You know, I remember meeting Mike Peters when I was 15 at a gig, and I wasn't even old enough to get in the gig. And he actually walked past us at the Hammersmith Palais in 1984, maybe, something like that. And I was like 15. And I remember someone went, there he is, there's Mike Peters. And he walked past me. And all I remember was he was so big and he had such massive hair and he had a huge leather jacket on. And I remember telling him this story and thinking, same height now. You know what I mean? Like, this guy became like my best friend. That's the weird one.
Yeah.
That's when it gets a little bit kind of, you have to scratch yourself a bit, you know.
What was your first gig?
If you want a cool one, it was probably around kind of 1983. We started going to a lot of gigs at the Hammersmith Palais. So I saw the U2, I saw the Water Boys, I saw the Alarm, I saw Echo and the Bunnymen, bands of that era. But I'd actually been to some gigs, and my dad took me to see Cliff Richard, and he took me to see Duran Duran. He took me and my sister to see Duran Duran back in the early 80s at Wembley Arena, and all it was just screaming. Like, that's it. That's all it was.
What was you like? This is amazing. I want to be up there having that done to me.
Yeah, so I'd spent all these years like ribbing my sister for liking this like terrible band Duran Duran, and then secretly down under the skin, I was actually starting to quite get into them because I quite like the way they looked and all that. I had to kind of back up a little bit on that one, yeah.
Did that kind of cement it, seeing those drummers on stage? Was it like, yeah, I want to have a crack at that?
Yeah, straight away. Yeah, straight away. And I remember doing my first gigs when I was playing in pubs when I was like 14, things like that. And I was a young 14. I wasn't like, you know, the man who was just, I was a baby. I was a boy, you know. And so, but I could play drums. So there was like all these puzzled people looking, going, who's he? What's with the kids? And I'd start playing and they'd all go, oh man, he can actually play. And then of course, when I got to like 16 and stuff, I was at school and I was like doing 3 nights playing in like Hammersmith and Fulham Road and stuff like that. My dad would take me, do the gig and, you know, support punk bands and stuff. And then he'd drive me home and I'd go to school the next day. It was like, you know, bonkers.
What's the story about TV legend Roy Castle being responsible for offering you some drum advice to your dad about what you could do?
Yeah, that's true as well. He came to our school when I was like 13.
Legend.
A total legend, right? So anyway, he came to kind of take the assembly, right? So the place is packed and there's parents there as well. And it was me on the drums and the other one person who played an instrument in our school who was called Lawrence, who could do a bit of saxophone. That was it.
Right.
So goodness knows what we would do. So we're at the side of this hall and then Roy Castle goes, hey, drummer, give me a beat, man. Give me a beat. So I kind of, quick as a flash, started playing this beat. And so Roy Castle started tap dancing to my drumming, which was like, oh my God. And he was incredible. And then afterwards, my dad was like, come with me. And he's like, hello, Roy, blah, blah, blah. And he just said to him, what should I do with him? He's 13. And Roy Castle was great. He went, well, he's obviously got talent. What you want to do is you want to harness it. Go and take him to a good teacher, but who's not going to knock that out of him, who's actually going to bring it out of him. So my dad got me in with this guy he was in the next kind of town. And I went to a couple of days with him, a jazz drummer. That drummer moved to London. There was a shop just off of Regent Street called Foots.
Right.
Big drum shop, really famous. And down underneath Foots was this guy's little room that he would do drum lessons. So I did like once a month with him. And he tried to teach me to read and do stuff for London shows. And I just couldn't get it, but I could play. So one day he said to me, after a few years, he said, look, I'm going to be straight with you. He said, you're in the top 2 I've ever taught for natural talent. He went, and you're in the bottom 2 for reading. He said, so I just don't think it's your bag. I said, I agree. I said, I don't see like the West End being my thing. About 20 years later, I was in Soho playing with Robbie and I was right next to Foots and I was like, I wonder. And I went in and he was there.
Wow.
And I was like, John Taylor, man. I said, do you remember me? And he didn't. He didn't remember me. He was like, and then I started talking. He went, are we talking like 20 years ago? I said, yeah. He goes, I remember you. He goes, and he said, natural talent, terrible reader. And I was like, yeah. And he went, what are you doing up here? I said, I'm playing with Robbie Williams. And he just beautifully looked at me and went, who? I was like, yep. that'll do.
Oh, awesome.
But that taught me loads. Because he was a jazz drummer, so he taught me how to play jazz. So that's how I learned to swing and vary it up. You know, not just that one-dimensional drummer. That's why I've got a bit of groove and stuff like that, because he taught me how to play that different style.
You didn't get a chance to cross paths with Roy Castle before he passed away, did you, again?
Well, you won't believe this one either. This is true as well. So my friend, his girlfriend was friends with Roy Castle and his wife, Fiona, right? So anyway, Roy Castle died. This friend Sue, who I haven't seen in the last 20 years, said to me, will you come to the funeral with me? And she was going out with my mate Scott at the time, and Scott couldn't do it. He's like, I'll go with Sue with you. So I went to the funeral, and at the end, was standing next to Roy Castle's wife. And she just looked at me, she went, can I just ask you, who are you? And I said, well, ironically, and then I told her the story, and she went, oh my God, that's just a beautiful story. That's him all over, isn't it? I said, I'm a musician now. I said, that's my job. And he was the one who put me on the right path. And she's like, that's the nicest thing I've heard all day. It was a really lovely moment.
Unbelievable, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Strange, man.
So cool.
Very strange.
What was your plan for life after school? Did you think that drumming could be a career?
I did, but it didn't fall into place for a while. My mum and dad were really super kind of supportive and that. But when you're 16, there isn't that kind of job in the job centre that just says musician. Unless you're in a band who've cracked it, you don't become a session drummer at 16 or that. So I just went to work. I did a load of jobs. I worked in a department store. Then I did a bit of building. Then I was a lift engineer. Then I drove car parts around. I did just loads of stuff.
Was you good at any of them?
No, I was terrible. All of them. Absolutely terrible. But I was still playing and I was rehearsing and I was gigging.
How good were your bosses at that time for letting you go? Or was that why you had so many jobs?
Yeah, I was just rubbish at it anyway. And then my big break was a band called the Mock Turtles, Manchester band, right? So I was driving a van at that point and I was playing in cover bands all over the shop, right? And I was literally doing 5 nights a week, but I was still driving this van. I don't know why I was doing it because I was earning a bit of money, playing in blues bands and pubs and all that. But this song, Can You Dig It, just kept on coming on the radio every day, right? So I'm driving around thinking, this is the best song I've ever heard, ever. I love it. So on a Wednesday night, I think Top of the Pops was on, right? And they were on it, right? And I was mesmerised. Like the singer was cool. He had this kind of light blue jacket on. And
great bass line to that song as well.
Andy Stewardson, amazing bass line. Yeah, brilliant bass player as well. So anyway, the next night I was playing in this 2-bob bar in Teddington, just a blues band. And I went in for a wee at half time and this guy said, you're impressing a few important people. And I was like, am I? Who's that then? He went, oh, this band, you might not have heard of them, the Mock Turtles. I was like, oh my God, I watched them on Top of the Pops last night. He went, well, come and meet them. And they were at the bar. And the first thing I saw was Martin Coogan, the singer. And I said, oh man, I saw you last night on Top of the Pops. He was like, oh, great. I went, in fact, you're still wearing the same clothes. And he said, that's because I haven't been to bed yet. And the producer, who's quite a famous producer called Pete Smith, he just kept punching Coogan on the arm going, this is your drummer. This is the guy you should have in your band. So we swapped details and everything. And then it took about a year for it to actually, because they did have a drummer. And then they finally decided that, hey, do you want to do it? Oh, you know, they lived in Manchester and stuff. So I moved to Manchester for a bit, but they were on their way down. It was a real shame because they were brilliant bands. But they peaked and then like the next single didn't do anything. So I kind of went into this new world of, wow, I'm in this cool band. Here we go.
Still a step up for you.
Yeah, massive. You know, like went on tour. So I'm like, you know, oh man, I'm in a split-up bus.
You're loving it.
Loving every minute. They're all moaning about the fact that the record company have done this, the record company have done that. So I wrote that out and then carried on gigging then. Stopped the day job and just carried on playing like 7 nights a week in various bands everywhere. But I'd had a taste then, so I knew that was what I was going to do. And then doors just started to open.
Is that kind of around the time when the opportunity to perform with Robbie came around?
Yeah. Robbie was in 97, and that was, again, it goes back to just playing with people. I did a little thing. I did a little tour. Well, it wasn't a little tour. It was like a support band for East 17, and it was arenas. And I don't know how I got it, but I got it.
What band was that?
It was a band called J-Pack, right? But yeah, go with the story, right? So it wasn't an audition. It was like, right, we saw you do something on The Big Breakfast or something. You and that other drummer, we need 2 drummers. So I'm thinking, amazing, Adam and the Ants, this is going to be brilliant. We're playing arenas. This is going to be great. No, what they wanted us to do was dress up as surgeons to this dance duo, one of them on a keyboard and the other one like dressed up like Hannibal Lecter, tied up in a straitjacket on one of those sack barrows, and we had to wheel him on at like Wembley Arena, and he would just stand there ranting while we stood there with 2 snare drums just miming. It was a load of nonsense, but we were playing Wembley Arena.
Yeah.
So God knows how, like, it was very funny. But then the agent who got that for me was a bit of a shock. And then he rang me, he just went, oh, there's these guys who need a drummer. There's no money in it. They just want someone to sit in one afternoon. And I said, oh, well, go on then, I'll do it, you know. And met these two guys, a guy called Steve McEwen and Phil Eisler. Brilliant musicians. And they were, you know, just getting some stuff ready for, I think, Steve's album. So I just jammed with them all day. And then I said, oh, what do you do then? And they were like, oh, we're writing at the moment with an artist. I was like, who's that? And they were like, Robbie Williams. I was like, what, Robbie from Take That, Robbie? They're like, yeah. He's like on his own now. And anyway, a week later, I get a call off this agent going, oh, do you want to audition for Robbie Williams? And I went, yeah. How many people going for it? And he said, 26. And I went, wow. I said, what number am I? He went, 23. And I thought, so anyway, I thought, whatever, I went. Anyway, so got there, John Emery's, and I get sent up to this canteen. And they give me a cassette, like a Walkman, and a piece of paper and a pen. And they said, like, there's 4 songs on there, learn them. There was South of the Border was on it. There was a song called Teenage Millionaire, which was like Nirvana, and a couple more, right? Anyway, I'm looking at all these drummers, and they're like scoring it all out and all this. And I was thinking, well, that ain't happening. So I just wrote on the back of my hand, fast, slow, medium, fast, right? Tracks 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Anyway, right, okay, it's your turn, Smiley. Do you want to come down to the studio? I walk in and there's a drum kit. Lots of people milling around. And Phil Eisler is there. And I went, Phil. And he went, you're here. And he turns around to Guy Chambers and he went, this is the guy I was telling you about. And he goes, oh, right, brilliant. And just as all the planets in the world aligned, for the first time that day, Robbie walks in the door. And they all go, hey, and he's like, hey, how you doing? It's like, oh, man. And they all hugs and all that. I'm just standing. He turns around and goes, who's this? And I said, oh, I'm Smiley. He goes, hey, man, how you doing? Big hug. He went, let's play some tunes. And he's vibed to the max. So they're like, yeah, let's do Teenage Millionaire. I was like, brilliant. Just remind me which one is that on the list? They're like, number 4. I was like, fast. They kick into this tune, which is literally like, Smells Like Teen Spirit. So I just went with it. And he's jumping around the room and the bass player's giving it. And of course, for the first time that day, it was like a band. So I got it. That was it. And then the next kind of year and a half was just bonkers, playing drums for the most famous kid in the country, you know.
Because, I mean, that was a rocking band. I always remember thinking Phil Eisler was, like, awesomely cool. He used to wear the kilt and all that stuff, didn't
very
he?
Cool,
like,
very cool.
It was fucking great, man. So was it always the intention to be like a rock band?
Yeah, no, I think they wanted to make it like a cool... Like he was, you know, he was quite heavily into Oasis at the time and all that. I think he was just falling out with them. But yeah, it was supposed to be, that was the idea. So Life Through a Lens is a brilliant record. If you actually listen to the tunes.
I wore that thing out.
Yeah, so they'd already recorded it. Like 99% of it was done. So Guy Chambers was really sweet, actually. He called me the next day and he's like, look, I'm going in the studio today in Chelsea. Turn up and I'll get you on the album somewhere. I think I sang backing vocals on one of the tunes, which was like really, really sweet of him because I got a gold disc out of that, which is my mum got. But yeah, it was brilliant. And we did a few tours and I recorded all the B-sides. So I'm on like the B-sides to like Angel, Let Me Entertain You, Lazy Days, Old Before I Die, all that kind of stuff, which is brilliant. And then we started demoing the next album, which was Millennium, No Regrets, Strong. And then I lost it because Chris Sharrock suddenly was available again and he wasn't in World Party anymore. And he was Sharrock's mate, and that was it. It was all gone.
Oh, man.
One phone call. So, yeah. But that kind of possibly a good thing, I think, because it kind of made me, I could have lived off Robbie for years, but it would have turned me into a bit of a knobhead, I think. You get lost in that world a little bit.
I'm interested. What was the whole vibe around that album and tour? Because that was obviously pre-Angels. There was a lot of legal stuff happening. We saw you at Rock City.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I know the legal stuff even filtered through to the merch on the tour. I think he had T-shirts that said, like, sue me or something
So sue me. Yeah. Well, he was getting sued by the guy who claimed he'd written Angels, right? And the guy in Ireland, and there is footage of him. And basically, Robbie went to Ireland, got pissed, spent the night with this Irish guy. They came up with this song, and then Rob took the song back to Guy. Guy knocked it into shape. It comes out, and this guy from Ireland turned up. He turned up on Robbie's door and was like, I want money. And Robbie was like, whoa. And he said, I'll have your watch. So he gave him his watch. He said, I'll have your coat. He gave him his coat. And then I think the next day, the management got hold of him and they paid him off a certain amount of money. So that was it, really. So the So Sue Me thing was based around that. Yeah. It was quite funny, you know. And remember, like he was in and out of rehab at this point. So it was all a little bit, he was quite a tricky cat. I loved Rob. I loved him. And it was me that he connected with. And I was the one, after gigs, we went back to his hotel room and we would sit and play backgammon for hours with like 2 pints of water.
That was his distraction.
Yeah. So I was like, that was why it was so sad, because just before I lost it, his management sent me a letter saying, look, we just want to thank you for what you've done for him. And you've been his guardian angel kind of thing. And we have noted it, and we really appreciate it. So they weren't very happy when it happened, when Chambers did it. But, it's life, isn't it? It's as I say, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, losing that gig, because I could have either gone, 20 years later, oh, yeah, used to play with Robbie, or I got off my arse and I went and worked for other people. So, yeah, in hindsight, it was a great learning curve, put me back on the straight a little bit.
Definitely. Because, from there, you didn't slack off. What was next? Joe Strummer.
Yeah, Joe Strummer, yeah. I don't think anybody's gone from Robbie Williams to Joe Strummer, But that, again, that's, when people ask about how did you get this and how did you get that, that was a fluke as well, because that was only through the keyboard player originally with Robbie was a guy called Martin Slattery. And then he brought in his mate Scott Shields to do the promo tour we did of like Germany and all that. And they were recording with Strummer. And then the drummer suddenly landed Marianne Faithfull. So turned around and said, I can't do any of the tour. Once again, he'd done the album, same score again. So they went, oh, what about Smiley? So I just got this call. Do you want to come down to the studio and kind of audition with Joe Strummer? And I was like, yeah, awesome. So I get to this place and the gates are opening. And as I'm pulling in the drive, Joe Strummer walks towards me and leans in my car and goes, you must be the kid. I'm just going to get a paper. I'll see you in 10. I go in, I meet everybody, and then we jammed a little bit. And because they'd already recorded the album, they gave me a couple of tracks that Jed Lynch had already done. The other drummer with Black Grape, brilliant drummer, really nice man as well. So they were like, right. And they just took the drums off and went, go on then, you do it. And I did it. And then, this is again when it twists, it looks like I've got it and it's all great. And then Jed rings up and says, the Marianne Faithfull thing's fallen through. So Anthony again is the MD, and he said, right, I'm going to have to make a decision on this, and I don't know what it's going to be. So Smiley, you go home and I'll call you tomorrow. I went, okay. It wasn't like, oh my God, my life hangs on this. I just thought, fair enough. So I said goodbye to everybody, and then I saw Joe, and I was like, right, bye then, Joe. I've really enjoyed today. It's been a pleasure. And he went, listen, what will be, okay? And I was like, yeah. And the story goes, Anthony decided to use Jed, walked down the stairs, got to the gate, and he was standing in the house over the street, and he waited to cross the road, and he changed his mind. And by the time he crossed the road, he decided to do it with me. Now, here's the next thing, right? So Jed, I knew Jed, right? Jed's one of the nicest men ever. So when I got home, and before I knew this, I rang Jed and I said, look, this is the deal. And I said, I just want to be, how are you feeling about this? And he was like, no, mate, he said, thanks for calling. I totally get it. And if they go with you, you've got my blessing. I heard those stories years and years later with people nicking gigs off people and going behind each other's back. And I've always said, you should just be straight. I've had it done to me, and I've been put in a position where I've done it to other people, but I've always made sure that I speak to them first and say, look, they kind of want me to do this. How do you feel? Most good musicians would go, no, fine. Thanks for being so honest.
It's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Just talking that stuff through.
Yeah. Great. And I've known musicians who have lost very close friends through it because they have done the dirty on them, so it's good to be honest.
I think you said that Joe Strummer tour, it toughened you up quite a bit.
Yeah. It was quite dark. Like, there was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of drugs on it, and I wasn't into drugs.
Was that your first exposure to that?
Yeah, well, the Robbie tour, Robbie was kind of, as I say, because he was going through rehab, he was dipping in and out of it. And when he was out of rehab and he relapsed, I saw a side of him I didn't like. He was just too off scale, I knew quite a lot of people who were getting into coke and stuff, and I just thought, do you know what? If I get into that, I'm going to like it, right? And that's going to have a really big effect on my life. And I just thought, do you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to make a decision now. So when we got on the road with Strummer, there was like 15 people on the tour. And after they worked it out, they were kind of, laying out 14 lines. And I was the other one out. And I clearly remember, I don't know why I remember it. I was sitting one night after a gig. We were going through the darkness and I was just sitting on my own looking out the window. And I had a glass of red wine and I was just sitting there. And Strummer came up behind me and he put his arms around my neck and he went, just let me tell you one thing. He went, you're right and everyone else is wrong. So just remember that. And then he said, you'll never get away from me. I don't know, which I thought was a bit of a weird thing to say anyway, but yeah. And I never did. I never got into it. And I'm really pleased I never got into it because I saw so many people that just blew life because of it. It's a horrible drug, coke. It changes personalities, but it doesn't particularly change them for the better. And so I've always avoided it. And it's really stood me in good stead that. because there's, a few times offers of tours have come up and you get down to the last kind of 2 or 3 and people go, well, what drum are we going to use? Well, if you've got 3 drummers of a similar ability, but 2 of them are just raging cokeheads and one of them's actually quite sensible, you are going to go with that safety net if you're going on a 2-month tour, aren't you?
Whenever it comes to touring and musicians, it's like, who's going to fit into this dynamic? Who's going to not cause any problems?
Yeah.
That's almost as much as the playing ability.
Absolutely.
Well.
No, honestly, Rob, I've said for years, it's kind of even 50-50. It's like half your playing ability and half what you're like as a person to spend the 2 months on a bus with, because if you're an arse, you'll just get up people's noses. You're not the person to take it. We've all met them and we've all seen them and we've all seen them lose gigs. They're incredible players, but then you find out some of the stories, and you just think, well, and then obviously as you're growing up, like I found kind of in the last 10, 15 years, I've played with a lot of people older than me. So obviously touring with Mike, there's no greater example of someone who just loves life, loves music, loves people, but he's not raging druggy, so. But then again, listen, don't get me wrong, Strummer wasn't. He likes a bit of a smoke, but he wasn't a mad, he maybe dipped his toe occasionally. The band, on the other hand, goodness me. So that was hard. I did feel excluded. It was hard because I just wasn't in their gang. And it was hard. It was very much on the periphery, but toughened me up.
Like you say, like you've had this opportunity to play alongside some like really iconic musicians over your career, and the list just seems to continue to grow. I mean, Robbie is like a pop icon now. Then Joe Strummer, Mike Peters, you say, all these people have like really passionate and devoted fans. Is it always kind of crazy experience being plugged into that when you join them?
Yeah, and as I say, the weird thing is the fans just assume that you know all the history and you know all the songs, but you don't know anywhere near as much as they do. They know everything. I've always got on really well with fans of bands. I've always kind of just made friends with them and stuff. And a lot of them can't believe it that they've got that pipeline to the band, but I just genuinely love them. The Clash fans and the Crazy Jam fans and the Alarm fans and all that. They're all kind of mid-50s. And they're all still full of life. And I love them, man.
That's the best thing, that music passion is still there after all that time. There's still that excitement from when they saw them that first time at 15, 16 years old.
And they know way more than me, And so that's been quite handy to tap into them a little bit sometimes. When you want to know a little bit more bit of history that you really should know, but you don't. You know what I mean?
Just out of interest, what was your involvement with Bad Company?
I did one tour. It was like a version of Bad Company. It was Mick Ralph's. They were touring America with Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke, and they had a guy called Bucket playing guitar and a bass player called, oh God, I can't remember, Jazz Lockery. And then they did an offshoot of it with Robert Hart singing, who's an amazing singer. And, of course, Mick Ralph. So Harry was doing it, the Thunder drummer. And then Harry couldn't do this tour, so I got asked to do it. The thing was, Mick Ralph wrote these songs. So when we rehearsed Feel Like Making Love, it was like, this guy wrote it. And he starts playing it. And then he says to me, little tip. He says, when you get to the chorus, slow down. I was like, really? He went, yeah, trust me. So feel like making da-da-da-da-da-da. And the further you pulled it back, the better people went, yeah, So no, I really enjoyed that. I only did one tour, but it was like really interesting, again, meetings of minds. I remember doing a thing called Four Good Men as well. And that was brilliant. That was half Simple Minds, half Big Country. So there was Derek Forbes and Mick McNeil from Simple Minds. There was Bruce Watson from Big Country. It was like the Scottish supergroup. And they had Ian Donaldson, who was the singer with H2O. So we used to go out and do all the hits, right? We went around America and everything. That was amazing. It's like being in Simple Minds. It's like being in Big Country. It's great. Like, all these people. Amazing.
But I think the biggest name you've ever been involved with is actually Jimi Hendrix, right?
Yeah, well, that's... I saw the guy. I'll tell you the story very, very briefly. I went to Ireland. My friend Jeff is a producer and he moved to Ireland. And he was working with Noel Redding, right? So he's ringing me up saying, oh, yeah, man, I'm actually recording with Noel Redding and I'm also doing Roy Harper's album, right? 2 total legends. So he said, will you come over to Ireland? I want you to record Roy Harper's album. And then there's a couple of tracks for Noel, but we're also doing a live show with Noel, right? So I'm like, this is awesome. So I go to Roy Harper's house. He's as mad as a box of badgers, right? All he wants to talk about is cricket or UFOs, right? Which is probably a whole nother podcast with me and you, right? So anyway, got on really well with Roy Harper. Really likes him. Fabulous man. And then we moved on to Noel Redding, right? So we did a gig first. And he's quite an old man, Noel Redding. He's like cardigan and slippers. So we do this gig in this old place called the Barrows near Cork. Amazing gig. Like, and this guy he was in Hendrix's band, right? Just amazing. So got him to the bar and asked him a load of questions over a few Guinnesses. And anyway, next day went in the studio with him and he had this track. So I put the drums down on it and I forgot about it, right? And then years later, I saw Jeff in Staines, right? And he went, got a story for you. He said, do you remember that track you did with Noel? And I said, yeah. And he went, well, he then got Ian Anderson's play on it, Jeff Rotal. And I went, oh, man, does that mean I'm on a track with Ian Anderson? He went, well, brace yourself. He said, he also found the original guitar take, which was Jimmy's. So the lineup on that track is me, Jimi Hendrix, Ian Anderson, and Noel Redding. And I went, so does that mean I was in the Experience then? He went, yeah, for one track. And I've never heard it.
You never? Oh, wow.
I've never heard it. He said, I'll send it to you.
Oh, man.
And he's never actually sent it to you. But yeah, so that, but then again, if you match that with the fact that I play with Chesney Hawkes, then you meet somewhere in the middle and there's my career.
I love that.
There you
go. Who would you love to perform with? Who's eluded you? Who would you like to get into the studio, play on one of your albums?
McCartney. Yeah. He was the one when I watched Abel Boreal Jr. got that gig and I watched him singing and playing and I always thought, wow, man, I would have loved to, probably a bit late now. I would have loved to play with everybody and anybody, really. I auditioned for the Waterboys, and I love the Waterboys, and I nearly got it because they actually even rang and said, you nearly got it, but you just didn't, which they never do. They never call you to say you haven't got it. But it was a really great experience. But all Mike Scott wanted to know about was Strummer. So we'd play these tunes, and then he'd go, so tell me, with Joe this, Joe that. So me and Mike Scott are getting on famously, and then I made this fatal error, right? So he had his band, and they were all great as well. And it was fabulous. And I was really enjoying it. And we finished the 4 songs that he'd sent me and it had all gone really well. And I said, oh, what time is your next drummer in? And he said, oh, not for about another half hour. And I said, oh, do you want to do something else? And he went, yeah, what do you want to do? And I picked a Waterboys song that the band didn't know. So he's kind of trying to teach the band. And I'm playing thinking I know it. And it didn't quite gel. And I wonder to this day whether if I just kind of gone, there you go, there's your 4 songs, make your decision. But, hindsight's an amazing thing, isn't it?
Regarding your Smiley and Friends project, how many albums is it now?
Well, I've done 7.
Shit.
I've done 7, but I've just finished the new one. But I've dropped the Friends this time.
Okay, yeah.
It's just me this time because I've basically did everything myself because it was lockdown and everything. So apart from my friend Matt Round playing bass, I did everything.
All right, cool. I was going to ask who's on the Last to Know track, but it's just you and Matt.
Yeah, Matt Round. Because I was doing stuff with Matt anyway at the time. He was at home as well. I was like, do you fancy doing this? And he's like, yeah. I just used to send him tracks and he'd send them back like 10 minutes later. I didn't have to change one note of the whole album. It was so good. Because we've been playing with each other for a while, we kind of we understood each other. So, and then I did everything else. I've got a studio and it came really, really easily. And then I changed the way I did it a little bit. I changed the format of how I wrote. I changed how I wrote words and the way I put the songs together. And it's my favourite album by a mile. I've got another song that I'm going to put out this week called Just Show Love, which I've just got a guy to do a video for, which I think is possibly the best song I ever wrote.
That's got to feel good because you feel like you're constantly growing. And
yeah. I sent it to Jules Peters. Don't know why, because she never listens to anything, right? But she's great for a chat. And I sent it to her and I must have just got it at the right time. And then about 10 minutes later, she rang me. She went, oh, my God. She said, is this you? I said, yeah. She went, right, stay there. Like 10 minutes later, Mike's on the phone going, is this you? I said, yeah. He went, George has just played me this track. He's like, this is amazing. I was like, well, yeah, I'm quite pleased with it.
And the whole album's out in September, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And do you know what? It's 41 minutes long as well. It's really short. It's really short.
Old school. Old school.
Yeah, proper old school, man.
Smiley, thanks ever so much, mate. I've loved catching up with you, dude.
Oh, it's been lovely speaking to you, mate. And listen, as I say, we're going out in March, April, the Alarm at the moment. So we'll hook up and get you to some shows and
see everybody again.
Yeah, come and see everybody. But it's been lovely speaking to you, mate. Love you loads, brother.
big shout to Smiley for coming along and being a brilliant guest here on the Straight to Video podcast. Check out his new album 2021, which you can pre-order from smileysfriends.co.uk. And if you want to learn more about his touring stories, then you can pick up a copy of Clang Smiley Drops a Few, which is out now. As mentioned in our chat, Smiley also has his own recording studio, which can be found at sunshinecornerstudios.co.uk. So lots of great stuff there for you to dive into. Thanks for the continuous support of this show. All earlier episodes are available at stvpod.com or through your favourite podcast platform. And please, if you can, check out everything that's happening over on our Patreon page at patreon.com/stvpod. Now that's way too much promo for one episode. I hope you're all doing great out there, and thanks for continuing to listen to these chats. It really means the world. So until next time, take care of yourselves and speak real soon.